Alas, we are going to talk about Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. So it was a movie that was released in 2011 and it was directed by Thomas Alfredson. And Thomas Alfredson, I believe he is Swedish, and I looked up his IMDb and I didn't recognize him from too many things. The one thing I did recognize him from was the horror movie The Snowman with Michael Fassbender. with Michael Fassbender, Rebecca Ferguson, and Charlotte Gainsbourg. And I think the movie The Snowman is kind of in the ranks of some of the trailers that me and my friends loved watching the most just because of how ridiculous they are. You have that. You have Skyscraper with Dwayne Johnson. That's a crazy one. But that was a weird one. I kind of do want to watch it. Just the idea of a horror movie based around a snowman. I remember, I think they show the snowman in the trailer, or I just looked it up at some point, and it looks so. The trailer's like, you're really scared of this snowman. Okay, enough snowman talk. We're here to talk about a serious drama, serious espionage case, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So the movie, as you can probably tell, is very, very British. It was made by a British production company, and it had a 12 million budget with a gross worldwide of $81 million. So, it did fairly well for itself. And I also looked, it was about, I think, 25 mil. That was domestic, as in US, Canada. So a lot of it was overseas. And yeah, it was the top selling movie in Britain for a couple weeks, I believe. So, it is very, very British. It won a BAFTA for Best British Film. So, there you go. I believe most of the cast is British, and then you have a Swedish director. Interesting. But it also, in terms of accolades, had three Oscar nominations, should I say. One for Gary Oldman, who plays the titular role. Not titular role. I mean, maybe. Is he one of them? I have no clue. He plays the protagonist, Gary Oldman, as George Smiley, who is a agent. I can't say everybody's job description because I have no clue how that ranks in the MI6 ranking, or the circus as they call it. I have no clue how that system works or anything. And it also got Oscar nominations for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Score. And I think, honestly, Gary Oldman and the score were very, very worthy of said nominations. And I think that the best adaptation, screenplay, best adapted screenplay, I think that is where I had a lot of trouble with the movie, honestly. Not that it was made poorly, perhaps, but I think that just certain stories work best in certain mediums. And I'll get back to that a bit later. So first, I kind of just wanted to talk about a general overview of the plot, because the plot is very, very convoluted, to say the least. It's very complicated. It's a movie where you very much have to be dialed in and hearing every bit of dialogue, because it is very dialogue heavy, every bit of dialogue to kind of piece together everything. I think that this episode of the Cine Club might be a little shorter than others because, honestly, I don't know what to say about this movie sometimes because it does confuse me a bunch. So I'm kind of going to have this serve as more of a review, I'd say, this time. And then I'll kind of get into spoilers territories near the end. So I'll start off by not going into too many spoilers. So, So I guess a brief log line of the film is that, it's in the height of the Cold War, it is a British espionage film about MI6, I believe, something like that. Some secret agent government thing. And at the beginning of the movie, the audience get told, it's in the trailer as well, that there is a mole in the organization, and they have to snuff out the mole. And so you have Gary Oldman's character, who is kind of a seasoned veteran. It seems like he's a very I don't want to say stoic, but he's a very reserved person. I feel like most of his acting is very straight face. There's a lot of quiet in this film, like scenes where people are having a conversation, but like the silence talks more than the actual dialogue does. And Gary Oldman, it's like he's a master at that. There was a lot of that in it, and yeah, I mean Gary Oldman does that wonderfully, and Gary Oldman's just great. Let's be honest here. He has so many different types of movies. You have Gary Oldman in The Fifth Element, a little different than this movie, just a little. But yeah, so we have this mole in the organization, and then you have this upper echelon of individuals who are a part of this organization, and it seems like you can't trust anybody. And that's kind of the analogy that John Hurt's character kind of sets out. You have all these chess pieces with different people's faces on it, and it's kind of just a game to figure out who's working for what side and what everybody's intentions are. And the structure of the film is quite non-linear in the sense that there are many flashbacks and throwbacks to scenes that are very important within the narrative that we're going along. But yeah, there are many flashback scenes and everything. And I think that's a part of it also why it can be so convoluted and hard to follow. But in terms of cast, we have, this is an all-star cast, honestly. We have, people just kept showing up and I was like, oh my God, you're in this film too. So yeah, Gary Oldman. And I know I just talked about him a bit, but Gary Oldman, he does steal the show. Got an Oscar nom for his best actor. And I'm curious who won that year, actually. I'm going to look it up right now. So 2011, Best Actor 2011. So am I in the right one here? Colin Firth, King's Speech. Maybe I should look up 2012 here. 2012, you had Jean Dujardin for The Artist. Well, one of those two beat him out. Okay. Yeah, I think that was him. And then Gary Oldman was nominated as well. I've never seen The Artist. But, sorry. I keep getting sidetracked today. So we have Gary Oldman as the protagonist, George Smiley. And we are following him because he is kind of the one who unravels the mystery. And he seems to be the type that is very much, he doesn't say it explicitly, but he lives for his work. He lives for this organization. He's given his life to it. And he's the kind of person who is built for it and will go to any lengths to preserve the integrity and kind of unravel the mysteries. Yeah, so he's great. And then we have Colin Firth. I want to talk about like their jobs in the movie, kind of their roles, but sometimes it's just hard to say. They're all just like members of the MI. It's like a club. They're just part of the circus, as they say. They're a part of the circus. But yeah, you have Colin Firth, who is kind of more in the end, it kind of turns out that he may not have been the most ethical and moral person there. But yeah, I love Colin Firth. Colin Firth is great in this movie. We have Tom Hardy as well as a younger agent who kind of gets, I don't want to say his back turned to from the organization. Then he has to come in and reprove himself or kind of just team up with Gary Oldman and prove that what he did was the right thing. You have John Hurt, which honestly, his character kind of like felt like it disappeared at him. I felt like I was missing something because I know Gary Oldman gets laid off at some point or he leaves the organization, then comes back to kind of unravel this mystery. But John Hurt's character, he had these chess pieces. Maybe he just didn't come back to solve it because like he was very uninvolved near the end. But he kind of seemed like also at the beginning the leader of everybody. I don't know. You also have Toby Jones, who was in, which one was it? He was in Age of Ultron at one point. Which other one was he in? I don't know. I think it was Civil War. He was in Civil War. He was the old Hydra computer guy. I forget the exact name. But yeah, he's great. Toby Jones is great. Mark Strong, who has quite an interesting haircut, gotta say. Not the biggest fan of his haircut in this. He is good as well. He kind of is the most emotional in this movie. He is a strong emotional connection core to this movie because of what his character goes through and kind of how he ends up. And it's interesting because he is one of the members who ends up outside of the organization at the very end, and he was the one who kind of shows the most emotion near the end. And yeah, it's just interesting that all these members, all these men who are part of this job have to be so I guess there is some emotion with, like, you know, they're yelling and they're very passionate about what they do, but they don't inside who they are. They never show that. It's always their work personas, and yeah, that's just part of the job. And Mark Strong's character was able to get out of that. And you have oh, I don't want to mispronounce his name. Kyran Hins. I'm not going to try again, but he was in Belfast. He was great in Belfast, and he was in this as well as another one of the agents. And honestly, I don't really know what his character did. He was kind of just at that big table with everybody, just one of the big guys of the organization. Who knows? And then you have lastly Benedict Cumberbatch, who was also great. Benedict Cumberbatch, kind of the younger agent who Gary Oldman takes under his wing, and he kind of gets him to do some sleuthing. I really like that scene as well. I think Benedict Cumberbatch was great as well. Got him to do some sleuthing, which was fun. But yeah, so those are the characters in the film, and where do I start with this movie? So I'll start by saying the performances were great. It's an all-star cast of British actors. And like I said before, I think that the way the script was written leads to a lot of dialogue heavy, but also alongside that dialogue, I think the reason why people like it a lot is because you have all this exposition, but intertwined with that, there is a lot of subtext that is delivered through the use of silence. And I love that. I think that is such a good tool for a filmmaker to have, to use the silence. And yeah, like I said before, Gary Oldman does this incredibly. And you have a lot of long takes of people talking, which technically are done very well. Performance-wise, done very, very well. But again, can't say they're the most engaging. Which is one of my gripes. But I'll get to gripes in a second. First, I'll talk about some good things, you know. I think that it was shot very... Technically, this movie is very, very polished. Very well done. Visually, there's a lot of very cool visuals in this. I think it's very gray, which is nice to kind of... I mean, it's a very, very somber movie. It is a spy movie, but it's kind of a spy movie that showcases the underbelly of this organization and how kind of like everybody's... feels like they can't trust anybody. They're backstabbing everybody. It kind of seems a little depressing how this is their job and all they're trying to do is see if they can trust anybody. And yeah, it kind of is a bit depressing. And it's very gray at some points. You have... I don't know. It's very reserved at points where it just shows you plainly what the movie is and allows these performances to shine, which was very nice. And also, yeah, the music accompanying it, it was nominated for Best Score. So yeah, the music was incredible as well. I really liked the music. A few highlights, I would say, in my opinion, were a few scene highlights were the first scene. I don't know if it was exactly the first, but the first sequence with Mark Strong in the flashback in, I believe it was Hungary. He was going on a mission in Hungary, and he was sitting at a table at a cafe, and it was actually, spoilers, it was a double crossing, and he ended up getting shot. And in that crossfire of this agency shootout, a woman who is holding a baby got shot. And yeah, I mean, that was a great way to start the film. It really gets you interested. You have this woman who is caught in the crossfire of this government job, and yeah, they don't go along with that. And honestly, they don't really get too much slack. I mean, they don't get in too much crap for that. And I don't know. I feel like if it was more typical blockbuster, you might go down that route. Kind of like the thing with the... I feel weird comparing this movie to Avengers, but it's like, yeah, you have the Sokovia incident where there's so many pedestrians that got killed in that and everything, and that was a big part in Civil War, where, yeah, people had backlash on that, and the characters really struggled with this damage that they done to everybody, and that wasn't the biggest thing in this movie. They didn't go down that route, which you might have expected it to if it was kind of playing along this typical thriller narrative, but... yeah, it kind of just, that happens, and then they move on, which is I don't know. It's an interesting plot point because you're like, oh, damn, that's kind of crazy. These guys' jobs get them in so much danger, not only them, but the people around them. And to what point? What was the point of all that? Did that really need to happen, that she was caught in the crossfire? It's a, yeah, very, very striking image at the beginning of the film that gets you very much engaged to see, what happened. And yeah, it's kind of a mystery of, you have that scene setting up and you're like, oh, why did this happen? Why did he get ambushed at this cafe? And structurally, I think the story makes sense that you're trying to figure that out, and it does come to a satisfying ending. But yeah, the medium of film, I don't know if it really worked, because you really had to put this puzzle together, and it was a little difficult to do with the medium of film. So yeah, but the first scene was very engaging, and as well as the last scene. Honestly, I think the last scene was my favorite scene, with Colin Firth and Mark Strong again in another one of the best scenes of the movie, where you have, I think Colin Firth was behind bars. It looked like bars. Maybe it's just some like government detainment facility where it's like, okay, you worked for us for a long time, but we're not actually going to put you in prison or something. He seemed like he had it like decent off. But yeah, okay, so you had him in this gated up area, and then you see Mark Strong in the woods with a rifle, and he shoots him in the face. But it's not like it's not like an action thing. He just it's quite somber. He shoots him in the face, right here, right below the eye, and then his blood starts pouring, kind of like a tear. And you go back to Mark Strong, and he's the one crying too. I don't know. I just think that image of you have one tear in blood and one tear in actual tear, one tear in tear, one tear in blood, and yeah, that I think it was a great ending. I think it was a great ending, and I'm honestly, I'm trying to think of why. I think those images, it's two people hurting in different ways. One physically, he's kind of dying, got shot in the face, but the other one who it's because they built up that relationship with Mark Strong and Colin Firth, and it made me think, like, were they lovers? That was a question as well. It's like, that's another one of the subtext things where it's like, oh, they very much could have been involved because they were very, very good friends. They made a point to show how close they were. And yeah, maybe it could have been more than friendship. You never know. But yeah, it's one of the scenes where, yeah, because of that kind of subtext, very quiet, not a word was spoken between them. It really made you think about what their relationships were. And yeah, I think the ending worked very well. The last scene that I really, really liked was Benedict Cumberbatch stealing a book, a logbook. And I feel like it did contrast many other parts of the film where it's not as dialogue heavy. And it was kind of one of the more typical, really cool spy moments, which it's a weird thing because the movie feels like it's very smart and tries to outsmart you. And this feels like the most, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. It's the most mainstream kind of scene that people can get along without having to know so much of the other moments of the film. It's like so much of the movie, you need to know so much and piece it together to understand what's happening. But in this scene, you get set up. Okay, Gary Oldman told Benedict Cumberbatch, you got to go steal this book. Okay, we know he has to go steal this book, but it's on this level where he's not supposed to go, and you don't want to get caught, or else Gary Oldman is not going to, he's going to say, oh, you're on your own, Benedict Cumberbatch. And okay, you get these stakes set up, and very clearly you know exactly what's at stake. Okay, he could get outed. Yeah, you don't need to know much about the other parts of the movie. And maybe that's the reason why I liked it so much, because yeah, it was more of a brain shut off moment where you could see him. It was interesting. Yeah, he couldn't take his bag in, but he got somebody to set up a phone call where he's like, oh, can you bring me my bag while he's in there during this phone call, stuff the book that he needed into his bag. And it's like, oh, okay. It's a typical spy scene, and it's like, oh, will they pull it off? Will they, won't they? And it turned out great. And that said, it is one of those things where it's like, it was set up so clearly for anybody to see, more of a brain turn off, and you can still understand it. So that leads me into, yeah, I think that this movie is quite a mission to get through, pun intended. Yeah, it's just like you have to be paying so much attention to everything that they're saying. And like, I like puzzles. I'll say that. But like, piecing this together, it felt like so much work. And honestly, that's not what I want in a movie. Or at least when I was watching it, that isn't what I wanted in that movie. And yeah, you have to pay so much attention to what's happening, kind of read between the lines, because you have so many things, so many plot elements that they just talk about and you don't see, right? So you have that moment where Gary Oldman is talking about, I believe it was a Russian agent who he's telling not to go back to Russia or something like that. He's telling him, okay, don't go back. You can stay with us, but then he decides to go back, and he gives him his lighter, and that lighter is brought up later. Like, you don't see that scene at all, but it's very, very important because it is kind of a catalyst for, okay, he is one of the guys who ended up detaining Mark Strong's character in the end. He had the lighter and everything, but yeah, you don't get that information until near the very end, and you don't see it as well. So it's one of those things where it's like Gary Oldman is giving this exposition dump to Benedict Cumberbatch characters, but it's just, it is hard to follow. It's very hard to follow. Looking back at the movie, I watched a few videos on the movie. I looked up the plot, and I kind of tried to understand the themes and the characters a little more. Looking back on the plot, it is a very, very interesting plot, and I really liked, like, all the elements that were involved. It felt very... I mean, the guy who wrote it was, I believe, like some sort of secret agent, some sort of thing like that. And it's very clear that that is conveyed in the story. It's like, who can trust who? And things like, I don't know, it's just, yeah, there's very good spy espionage elements. You got all these, yeah, you got who can trust who, you got these double agents, you got people spying, like, all this, I'm just using random buzzwords, I feel like. All this to say, I really liked the plot, but I don't think that the medium of film is the ideal way to convey the story. And it is an adapted screenplay. It was based on a book. So what I'm getting from this, if you have all that information in a book, where I feel like in a movie, you're not going at your own pace, right? It's on this timeline that's going, no matter how intently you're watching the movie, it's still going to keep going and keep happening. With a book, you have to read every word, and you have to consciously make the decision to turn the page and continue the story. And you also have the ability to get insight into the characters' minds. I don't know if it's like a first person or third person book, but still, you get so much more expository information through just the prose of the book that I could see this being a very, very good book, which I've heard that it is. I can't say I'm the most interested in reading it because I have seen this movie. And it does seem like a very good book because the plot is really solid. And I think you can put all of these pieces together if in the book maybe it like keeps emphasizing some of these points and you get some of these more subtle references, kind of like just you just get them in the book and you can kind of digest them more. There's more prose alongside them to kind of guide you more. It just feels like the medium of a book works better for this story, in my opinion. That isn't to say that it wasn't made very well. This movie was made very, very well, very well, and I think honestly as good as it could have been, because it is taking itself very, very seriously, and people are very used to spy espionage movies that are very action heavy, very high stakes, very tension through people's lives being in physical danger, sneaking around, things like that. And this movie is very much not against that. It does happen a little bit, but like it's very much more subtle. And you have people just having face-to-face conversations with each other, but you're just not sure of their intentions. I talk about it more and it's like, oh, this should have made a good film, because like having a face-to-face conversation with somebody and you're not knowing who to trust, and that can be conveyed very well through performances, but I just think the general exposition just it was just hard to follow. I think I keep rambling on saying all this, and I think just the end, it's a hard to follow movie. It's a hard to follow movie, and I wasn't ready for it. It's honestly not my cup of tea, if I'm being British about it. Was not my cup of tea, this movie. And with a movie, I want to escape the real world. As much as I like to analyze movies, and as much as I like to pick things apart, trying to digest the different elements, like there is a degree of brain turnoff that I would like to have. And if a movie is able to successfully guide you through this experience while not having you to be the one to put so much work and so much effort into the movie as well. I think that's a mark for a really great movie. And I just don't think this one guides your hand very well, which, alternatively, it did have many accolades. It seemed to be very critically well acclaimed, and I very, very much understand that. It's very well made. And some people, maybe they may just be built different, you know, and they're able to piece everything together and be hyper focused on this the whole time. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just the mood I was in when I was watching it. It's one of those movies where you have to be very much in a certain mood to watch it. Like, I think I would be down with watching this movie again, knowing what I know about it now. Maybe I can appreciate some of the more subtle moments. I think it's one of those movies that could be better on a second rewatch. But honestly, I can't say I have the biggest desire to rewatch it. I think there are a lot of movies out there that are better on the second watch, and it's very interesting when that happens. I think the biggest one for me is Blade Runner. Like, the first time I watched Blade Runner, I'm like, what is happening? What am I watching? Why is this so well acclaimed? I thought it was a sci-fi movie. I thought it was going to be cooler. But then, like, rewatching it again, man, I love Blade Runner now. I'm the biggest fan of Blade Runner. And, yeah, it's very interesting when that happens. So I feel like this movie, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, could have that same sort of effect. But, yeah, a few other things. I don't think I'm going to go too much longer here, but a few other things. I think some of the themes of the movie, things like, so you have the chess pieces, which is a part of the marketing as well. I believe you had on a poster, you have Gary Oldman with like a chess piece and stuff like that. And then in the movie, you have John Hurt's character who kind of sets these chess pieces with people's face on it, kind of trying to figure out who the mole is. I think that the chess piece is a very good, I mean, yeah, it's a great analogy for like everything being a game. And I know chess isn't the most kids game, but just like the idea of games and the word game has a very like childlike relation to that. And it kind of just shows that, yeah, some of these games people are playing, like this Cold War is just, it's stupid. And you have these children, as in all these adults, who are playing this game of lies and deceit with each other, and you have to try to figure this out. And then it's just making everybody so tense, everybody so depressed. And that leads into another one of the themes where it's like the themes of living a life of lies, right? You can't trust anybody, you have no friends, and you have Gary Oldman's character, whose actual relationship with his, I believe, wife sabotaged because of his job. And you didn't see much remorse in his performance for that. Like, his character doesn't seem to mourn that loss very much because he's giving his whole life to this job and to living this life of trying to figure out the moral good for this organization, trying to figure out who he can trust, because yeah, he can't trust anybody, and it's very isolating. It seems like it's very isolating. Yeah, I mean, we have so many scenes with just him, like the scenes of him swimming, things like that. And yeah, it's quite sad in a way, because yeah, I don't think anybody looks up to any of these characters and is like, I would love to do that. I would love to be a government agent. It's kind of the opposite of some other like spy movies where it's like, whoa, they're so cool, they do these great things. But this one, it's like, you don't want to be any of these people. Even if they do some like cool things, like Benedict Cumberbatch steals that book. Whoa, like, you don't want to be any of these people. Their lives kind of seem miserable. Yeah, and it takes a certain type of person to do that, and Gary Oldman's character was that type of person. In the end, also, I think Bill had a line where he's talking to Bill, as in Colin Firth. His character had a line with Gary Oldman's where he says, I had to choose a side, and I made my mark. Which is interesting, because it's like, he was the kind of person, in the end, he revealed that he chose his side, that he had this personal investment in how he believed things should have been run. He said the West is like corrupt, and he wanted to take it into his own hands. And he's kind of like the opposite. He's the antagonist of Gary Oldman's character, who is very much for the organization that he works for. He doesn't have his own personal bias and agenda of what he's trying to do. And yeah, Bill's character, who is more kind of putting his morals first, his emotional self first, because he feels so unfulfilled with this job, and he was kind of burned for it. And yeah, that goes along with the themes of like you got to just be heartless for this job. And yeah, you wouldn't look up to his character because yeah, I mean he was the bad guy, I guess. He was the mole. Yeah, and I said it earlier, like Mark Strong's character, he's kind of one of the more emotional out of all of them, and he's the one who leaves the organization in the end. And he was just like a teacher, right? And yeah, it's interesting. This world of espionage, instead of James Bond getting with a bunch of women having these moral dilemmas, you have these guys just like not knowing who to trust and being sad. But yeah, I don't know what else I have to say about this movie. I gave it a 3 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd, 6 out of 10, and I feel like the way I'm talking about it, it didn't deserve it. But again, like I said, I really did, looking back at it, really like the plot and how everything went down. It's very smart. It actually is a very interesting part if you just get it explained to you rather plainly. And again, like I always say, it's just a rating. The rating doesn't matter as much as the discussion. And going into movies and thinking if you will like them or not, it's better not to just look at a star, how many stars somebody gave it, but yeah, what people are saying about it. So, because I think that if you are interested into watching this movie, after I kind of just talked all about it, it's the kind of movie that you definitely have to pay very much attention. It's a spy movie that doesn't focus on glamorizing the spies. It's very down to earth and kind of who can trust who, and it's very dialogue heavy. The plot is not linear. It's a little convoluted, and yeah, you have to piece things together and very much focus on it, and that will not be everybody's cup of tea, as it seemed to not be mine, but who knows, maybe on a second watch it will be. But yeah, in the end, it didn't, like I said before, it's probably a great book, didn't translate to film, I think, as much as I would like it to. And yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. I know it wasn't too long today, but that is my Cine Club review of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And I think also, going along just like the Cine Club, I think it's kind of one of the outliers because of how it is it's the most dramatic, down-to-earth one, I think, that I've done, and I think I've had the least to say about it. And I know the Cine Club, I wanted to search for like different movies and try to find different genres, as I've done. But the thing I'm finding is like I was considering, like, I'm a very, very big sci-fi guy, and I could just talk about random indie sci-fi movies for days and just watch a different sci-fi movie every week. Things like that. I did want to switch it up a bit and do different kind of genres and different styles, but I think I'm not going to like try exclusively and say it's a rule, but I think trying to find movies that I think I will be able to talk a lot about. And that's not labeling a certain genre. It's not labeling a certain style. But this is very much a movie, a Cold War drama, espionage, that I don't have too much to say. I don't know much about the Cold War. I'll say it. I don't know much about Great Britain. It's just subject matter that I'm not very familiar with. And I think sometimes going into movies, you can kind of tell that it's not a movie that you're going to be able to speak on or relate to very much. I think that's another reason why I wasn't able to talk too much about it, because I can't relate to it that much. And yeah, so just a small side note about going forward and the types of movies that I may choose. But okay, so for next week, I had a couple thoughts. I think I may end up doing these 3 films that I had in my mind eventually, all of them. But I think I wanted to switch it up and do something a little more fun. Again, I've never seen a trailer for this movie that I'm about to say. I don't know too much about it. I've read a couple of reviews, but that's about it. It seems like a good time. I believe it is labeled kind of a comedy. Here, let me just pull up the IMDb real quick. All right, so next week's movie It is on some streaming platform. I forget which. I'll check in just a second. I believe it's on Amazon Prime. But next week's movie is going to be from 1995, entitled Empire Records. I've never seen it. And yeah, it's from 1995, stars who's that? Is that Liv Tyler? I don't want to say stars because I have no clue which characters are the most important in the movie, but hey, she's on the poster and she's right there. Is that? Maybe it's not. Oh yeah, it is. It is Liv Tyler. Oh, you got Renee Zellweger in there. But yeah, don't know too much about it, and I'm not gonna look up any reviews. I've seen a couple like Letterboxd reviews. They're not always reviews. I kind of feel like I could read the first sentence. It's like, okay, are they gonna go really in deep, or are they kind of just like give a vibe check to the movie? Maybe like just a funny sentence or something like that, and I'm fine with those. But yeah. So it's a comedy drama music. Seems like a good time, kind of like a teen. I don't know. Movie. If I had to guess, maybe it's like a close to like a Ferris Bueller's Day Off type, kind of just a romp. That word says so little, but says so much. A romp. But yeah, I've seen this movie on streaming services for quite some time, and hey, I decided that this is going to be the movie for next week. Empire Records. So yeah,